everyone. This meeting of the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee will now come to order at 7:03 p.m. Just to note that this meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Is there anyone in the public recording this meeting as well? Seeing none, we'll move forward. All those who are able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Would the superintendent please take roll?
Dr. Crefries is not with us tonight. Ms. DiTomaso?
Yes.
Mr. Farley?
Here.
Mr. Gazzillo? Mr. Hagmeyer can't be here. Mr. Hopper?
Here.
Ms. Keith is not with us. Mr. Locatell?
Here.
Mrs. Latazori? Here. Mr. Less is not here tonight. Mr. Peters?
Here.
Mrs. Tucker? Here. Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Armacost?
Here.
We still have an open seat in Washington. Mr. Bartels?
Here.
I don't see our CBA rep, but just so people do know, I think everyone's met Lara Miller. She's our vice president of the CBA, and she will be taking on the president role. Yes, she's nodding, next year. So she is here with us. Hi, Lara.
Hi.
And our student rep is not here yet. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The chair validates this agenda in accordance with open meeting law. And is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the committee this evening? So now we'll move on. Student Affairs, Zach's not with us yet, so we'll move on to the next article. Secretary's report. Would a member please make a motion to accept the minutes of the regular meeting of January 25th, 2018?
Move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 25th, 2018.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Same.
One abstention, the motion carries. Okay, moving on the agenda, would a member please make a motion for the warrants?
Move to approve warrant number 2018-29 dated February 9th, 2018. Accounts payable in the amount of $307,442.94.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve warrant number 2018-29. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Same.
One abstention, the motion carries.
Move to approve warrant number PR 2018-32 dated February 8th, 2018. $627,506.35.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve warrant number PR-2018-32. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention, the motion carries.
Move to approve warrant number 2018-32B dated February 8th, 2018. Accounts payable in the amount of $113,859.53.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve warrant number 2018-32 Delta. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention, the motion carries. Okay, moving on the order of business, we have one gift for the committee to consider this evening. Would a member please make the motion?
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the gift, the donation of $2,500 to the Wacona Robotics Club from Crane & Company Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the donation to the Wacona Robotics Club. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, under the report of the chair, as the superintendent noted, we still have the Town of Washington School Committee vacancy. A note to all, the 7-town advisory is still scheduled for this Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock here. You'll see in the packet on page 1 the agenda for that evening. We're going to be adding another topic to that agenda we had a Finance Committee member in Washington request that we put something on regarding vocational schools and a discussion about, I believe that the substance was if there's not a specific vocation offered at Taconic and other places and towns where we want their students to go to Taconic, is there any way we can encourage Taconic to offer that vocation? So we're going to add that to the agenda. I actually like seeing and encourage seeing the towns request topics for the agenda. That's good. So that's going to be the 5th topic for that evening. The other topic we have, and I don't want to surprise Lori, but I like her input on this as well. We had the Berkshire County Task Force update, Berkshire County Task Force 2.0. That was last Thursday evening, a week ago from tonight, and it was attended by 9 of the districts in the county, about 30 people, if I judged the audience correctly, and it was, I think they were trying to bring new people in, but it turned out that many of the people that were there were members of the task force. So there were probably 4 or 5 faces that were new in the audience. So it kind of went through an exercise, and maybe Lori can help me out with this a little bit, but basically trying to get perspective from the audience about what help they're going to need moving forward from the task force. It's supposed to be transitioning into a supervised, a facilitation role more than anything else at this point in time. Districts that want to form relationships from shared services all the way up to further regionalization, seeking grants to do so. They would get help through the task force if they wanted, so they could take the burden off their local committees and groups that they would need to do such an effort. So it was about 2 hours long. It really didn't move anywhere in my opinion, but it was mostly there to try to get the information out, and unfortunately it was the same group that's been supporting the task force all along. So did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I liked that I thought was a newer concept that hasn't been fully articulated is they did talk about the importance of laying the groundwork so that in the event you were to share services or you were to even take more advanced steps, you've done a lot of the logistical, and that was somewhat reassuring and in a positive, I think, for us in Pittsfield, because we have done a lot of that. And so, for example, Superintendent McCandless and myself were able to say, oh, we have that dialogue. We talk to each other about those kinds of things. Our curriculum directors see each other as their probably closest colleagues in the county outside their own districts. Our special ed directors are on the same page in many places. So I think that was the first time that it kind of was acknowledged that you wouldn't necessarily just call another district and say, hey, let's share this, because under the surface, there could be many different things like the software you use, the programs you have. If I just added a program and you just added a program and we decide we're going to share services, that's going to be pretty difficult. But if you and I are talking all the time and we're already moving in certain directions, such as with our transition program, that wouldn't be the case. So I do think, and then I had the opportunity to be in a group where I was with members of communities that hadn't happened to that extent. So certainly we are not by any means down a path that would require kind of formal steps, but definitely I think most of us in the district, certainly in the central office positions, in the curriculum positions, in student services, would say that we're cognizant of a lot of the work Pittsfield's doing, and we communicate actively with them around that kind of thing. So that was the first time it kind of was like, it's not necessarily steps 2 and 3, there is a step 1, if that makes sense. For example, you'd use the same student information management system if you wanted to share certain staff. Or if you even just wanted to work together collaboratively and provide professional development, it would only be relevant if you're doing the same type of curriculum. So it could be years out, but we have relationships that might be relied on when if the time comes. And then we are part of a grant that that Northern Berkshire had originally contacted Mr. Amercost about, that involves Northern Berkshire, North Adams, Adams Cheshire, myself, meaning Central Berkshire, and then today I was on the conference call with Mr. McCandless from Pittsfield. And it's the same kind of work. What have you done? What works? What might work? Laying the groundwork. And it was, I think, obvious to the people talking to Superintendent McCandless and myself today, we already do work together pretty regularly, so some of the logistics of getting us together was pretty seamless. So that work, just a heads up if I can give it, is March 1st and 2nd. They're going to be here from the district management group, which is a grant-funded group that will be working with those districts I just named, just to look at that, not to make decisions, not to move forward formally, but what have you done that works, what might you want to do, and make some recommendations around how you would do it, or use some of the things we do as potential models for others, such as the transition program with Pittsfield. And there's going to be interviews on March 1st and 2nd. The dates were just finalized today. I will send out the times. They're looking for 1 or 2 school committee members to participate in some interviews as well as a retreat. And I'll send you all the information. And it would be, again, some of the smaller groups are just us in Pittsfield because they know the geographic and the logistics are likely to align us. Some of it's with the full group I mentioned to include the group from Northern Berkshire.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is the recommendation of the task force was for one district in the county. And so if you read through the report, it's online under the task force website. But if you read through it, you get to the part where they talk about where they would save the money. And I think they projected that this would save the county-wide upwards of $24 million. Well, you break down the costs, and a lot of it is what they call administrative or central office, but it's what happens when you combine into one transportation entity. What happens when you combine into one food services entity or custodial services. They for some reason, they got about 6 to 8 million efficiency out of that. The problem is they didn't have any depth to that analysis. They kind of left those numbers there, so you're left wondering, and many of us agreed that even if you had one superintendent in the county, you would still need superintendents to represent all the regions as they are. The other area they talked about where there was a more substantial savings would be right-sizing the county to the enrollments. Well, that means basically reducing staff. They didn't come out and say reducing buildings, but the savings would probably be even bigger with reducing buildings. But it's difficult in Berkshire County because they admit that geographically we are already optimized the way we are with where the different school districts are. It would be hard to get people from Beckett all the way up to Adams, Cheshire, for instance. Just logistically, it would become a nightmare, and you get in a situation where, we had with Berkshire Trail where they don't like sending the K through 3rd grade students long distances. So I think they put forward all these numbers. They don't have much justification behind them. They don't tackle the hard problems like governance. You got to consider when you have one large district is all of a sudden all the small towns lose their empowerment to make a difference in their districts, home districts. So they really haven't talked to that much, and I think that's one of the biggest impediments to doing anything with consolidation is getting all the towns to buy in. It's one thing for the school committees to buy in, it's another thing for all the towns to buy in. The other thing, I'll just put this simple notion out there that contracts with our bargaining units. Well, you're not going to end up having one contract with the smallest value, the ones who get paid the least. That's not going to fly. You're going to have to go with the largest contract. So they've not considered this, I don't believe, in any of their analysis. What would it cost to pay, for instance, the teachers, the paraprofessionals in the county at the highest rate that we currently have, which is probably Mount Greylock. I think Lennox, Central Berkshire is number 2?
Yes.
I thought it was 4, but okay. So that's where you've got that would probably subtract millions from the monies gained in the consolidation, and they don't have that thorough analysis that we can sink our teeth into. So I think that's, you may have seen the column by Bob Cohen from Williamstown, I believe, several weeks ago in the Berkshire Eagle, kind of refuting all that, and he's right. It's not in there. So if they want to continue down this path, they really need to do a lot deeper analysis, I think. Because I came away shaking my head that this is just not a good way to go. There's no depth to the numbers.
I just wanted to share also, Mr. Alcast had a really interesting point that it almost parallels to the concern about saving money by eliminating just to rebuild infrastructure because now you don't have what you need, so now you're rebuilding with, deputy superintendents or whatnot. He raised the question, which is the answer is yes, is that when you get away from smaller, and I don't subscribe to the notion that Wacona is a tiny high school. I came from a part of Eastern Mass with thriving high schools that are not large high schools and are not much larger than Wacona. But when you do get large, you do quickly start to think about how you can feel small. And you build things in to feel smaller. So many of you may be heard about things like a freshman academy. You do that to have the feel that Wacona gives to a ninth grader by its size and by its infrastructure and by its community sense that you'll see in high schools of 1,000 students. You start building in houses. You start building in different kinds of ways to make kids feel the way they do in smaller buildings. And it was kind of an interesting parallel. Mr. Peters was with us when Frank Locker was there, and we'll talk about that later, but through the Wacona School Building Project, one of his real, actually, accolades for us, but he didn't go that far because he would have liked us to be a little smaller, which we don't really, he really values the small high school. Many people value it so much that they pay for it in private education through Thayer Academy and Notre Dame and places of that nature, or they move to communities that have small school systems. So I just thought it was a really, when the question was raised of don't they, I said, well, yes, from my personal experience of doing it, of trying to build those systems in a large high school, but yes, from Dr. Locker's experience of traveling around the world, and he brought some of those ideas up to us, and I think we were pretty much able to say, we have some of that innately because of our size. So we don't need to do that, but it was kind of an interesting parallel.
So the other thing, it's not on the agenda tonight, but I wanted to share this with everyone because I just received this in email. And I don't know if Lori or Greg or anyone else received it, but it's the latest enrollment projections for Berkshire County from the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. And basically what I'm seeing is they're noting from 2010 to 18 that they tracked fairly well in terms of their projections. The news isn't great. They think their projections are actually going to be a little worse out through 2024. It looks like countywide, it looks to be around 13,500, and where we're currently at just over 15,000 students countywide. So I want to get to the data from Central Berkshire. So the projections were a little off for Central Berkshire, and this doesn't include school choice. So this is just based on foundation budget, I believe. But the 2018 projected was for 1528. The actual was 1555. So we actually have 25 more in the district than they had projected. And Berkshire County wide, they were off by nine enrollments. They have projected lower. Now they're looking at Berkshire County. I took out the data for Wacona, and I think Wacona now is about 540.
It fluctuates between 535 and 540 at any given time.
So looking at what they're projecting for Wacona, and again, this doesn't include school choice, but for 2028, I came up with 405. So even at that point, if you plan on another maybe 25 to 50 choice-ins, you're still in the mid-400s, and it's not a bad-sized high school. It's certainly sustainable.
The numbers that caught my attention as well is for some reason, and I don't fully subscribe to this to the extent it's being used, but this number of 100. We've graduated classes of less than 100 in Wacona. Many of us may have gone to high schools with classes of less than 100 successfully, but there is this notion of 100. What I noticed in that 2028 is if 100 is a reasonable number to worry about, when you go back, the K through 11 are at 100 that year. So you're in 2028, you don't have any school choice, nothing has changed for the positive. And your class sizes behind it are 100 still coming up. What I was interested in is, okay, in 2028, here's where we are, and our high school class sizes are above 100 or right out there. What does our kindergarten and through 4 look like? Has that dropped into 60s? It hasn't. So For some reason, there is a large use of this number, and it's been said several times. There are several districts on that list that are nowhere near 100 come 2028, but I just thought it was, if that number, just not that I'm in any way debating it, but just to give context to it.
So the other observation I wanted to make is, and I brought this up to the task force, is they have been emphasizing and overemphasizing declining enrollment. And it's gotten to the point where I'm beginning to recognize that, hey, if I keep hearing this, and I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm considering this community as a place to live in for the rest of my life, or even for the next 5 or 6 years, 5 to 10 years, that's going to be a turnoff. Because that's telling me that, so it's one thing to recognize the problem and do something about it. It's another to make such a big deal about it that you begin to turn people away. So, my question to all the communities would be, what are we doing to turn ourselves around and bring more people in? They talk about the 22 to 40 demographic for addressing childbirths and bringing people in, bringing kids into the districts. Dalton is doing the Grow Dalton, so I applaud them for that, and I know that the neighboring communities are going to benefit from that. But, what's the rest of the county doing to try to, instead of having to react to declining enrollments, let's bring the population back into the county.
Fiber optic.
Fiber optic? That doesn't help. Yeah.
And, that allows people to move into the community who don't necessarily, who can work from home. That's, a big selling point for people coming into a community. Do they have internet so their kids can do homework?
Yeah.
And fiber optic is coming, so hopefully.
Well, there's got to be other magic sauce out there too that they need to consider. I just get really worried that we react so much to going south that we need to consider improvements and bringing people in more.
Didn't Pittsfield just hire a business development manager? I think his role is going to be trying to help develop, or help businesses grow in the community or come into the community. That's what we really need.
Yeah.
need
You're talking about Jonathan Butler?
What?
Jonathan Butler?
I don't remember the name, but it was
Okay.
announced that now Mayor Tyra had hired.
Oh, okay, you're retired.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for the diatribe, but we'll move on to reports of the subcommittees. Curriculum? Anything out of curriculum?
We haven't met.
Dr.
haven't met.
Evans,
The next meeting is March 8th.
March 8th.
Yes.
Finance.
Yeah, I can start. And Bonnie has agreed to give multiple resolutions to read, and she'll go through them in just a minute. We last met on January 30th at 6 o'clock, central office. We had about a 3-hour, 45-minute meeting. It was attended by the full finance subcommittee. And although that feels like a long meeting, it was probably some of the best discussion and debate that I've seen in the last 8 years in finance subcommittee. So it was a productive and appreciated meeting. Minutes were approved. The regional agreement was discussed. I believe Dick went through that at the last school committee meeting, and we are currently waiting on DESI for some responses. When we get those changes from DESI, we'll bring it back to the full committee. But essentially, what Dick reviewed last time is where we stand with the regional agreement. We also acknowledge that the 7-town advisory meeting, which is going to take place on the 13th at 7 o'clock at Nessicus, that we wanted to ensure that finance subcommittee, as well as school committee, was very well represented at that meeting. And based on a straw poll, we should have a significant amount of the finance subcommittee there for that meeting to support the 7-town advisory. We had a drill down, thorough review of the tentative FY19 budget. In that process, the full finance subcommittee supported the tentative budget. There was, did we have executive session for the, we did have an executive session in regards to negotiations and health insurance. And we did address some emergency business around the letter from Cummington. So I think before we open up the discussion around the letter from Cummington, it might be favorable to move through the resolutions and to have a presentation.
In what order?
Fire some time. I know, I thought you could fire some time there.
All right.
I was like, he's buying your time.
Well, we could move into the discussion around the letter from Cummington. Actually, we have the 7 members of the finance subcommittee are represented here that were there that night for that debate. So we have 7 out of the 9 school committee members here tonight that already have had a deep dive into the letter from Cummington. It was in the packet, and we would certainly entertain any questions in regards to it.
Was that the right number that we wanted to get?
Now, so there's a couple things. I'll start this off. The big sticking point right now is the OPEB, and they have been firm with their offer of $585,000, whereas we believe that the number ought to be what,
1.7, 1.8.
1.7, 1.8 million. So we're pretty far off. I want to put this also in context of one of the 7 town advisory meetings that we had, where we originally started off at 2.2 million. Then we went into a pretty deep analysis with an accountant, actuary, and that's where we came to the 1.7 to 1.8. But at the time, I believe Cummington was around 500,000 compared to our 2.2 million. And none of the towns were too pleased about that. They didn't want to accept that kind of a contribution by Cummington to the OPEB. So there was a lot of time that went by. We met with them again. They gave us the numbers, the 585, plus some other conditions that they wanted in terms of tuition rates, other arrangements that would have to be made, the E&D, the splits there. And I think the Finance Committee was okay with everything, but the fact that there was no math behind the numbers. So we didn't know how they'd arrived at them. We took an action to reach out to Cummington and ask them for more information on the numbers. How did they arrive at these numbers? We never got anything in return. It's been silent since, and then we were presented with this letter. So I spoke with Attorney Dupre. We shared the letter with him. He also gave us information. I hope it's in the packet. It's the ruling on the case with Worthington and the towns. It's not in the packet. It's not in the packet. All right, well, we'll get that to everybody. But it's basically just the decision that was made that Gateway was not owed any money by Worthington as far as OPEB is concerned. So Attorney Dupre did not feel that that was favorable for the district. But there's still, it's case law and decisions can be overturned. So I didn't want to respond to Cummington without this committee's authorization. Or do nothing, or do something. So I was hoping it would come up in discussion, and the members of the Finance Committee can take it from here and discuss it some more, the merits, pros and cons.
I just want to, correct me if I'm wrong, and I thought I remember this, that when we got our accounting back, and it said 1.7, 1.8 million, Cummington had also had an accounting firm, but they came back at 1.1 million.
I thought it was less.
And then, or maybe 900, but it was around $1 million, not the 585 that's projected, yeah. We came back with the 1.7, and then the second time they came around. So the first time it was around $1 million, and then they came back this last time with the 585 that they put into this letter. Is that, am I remembering that right?
No, not precise, no. They never had.
Ever offer around $1 million? I thought they offered around $1 million.
They never, yes, they came back with an offer of around $1 million. That was about 10 months ago.
Right.
But that wasn't based on the CPA's ruling. We've had 3 CPAs look at the numbers and come up with basically the same thing for the district. But the CPAs have not been involved in taking it from the district to Cummington. And that's where the Cummington share is the issue there, or the articulated issue, whether it's really an issue or not, depends on who you are.
But so Cummington did have an offer around $1 million.
But
Now
they
they're
did,
going to
10 months
585.
ago, they were around $1 million, that's
But
right.
now they're half that.
So my question would be, what happens now we're going for this new Wacona? When the time comes to say divvy up what the Wacona's gonna cost and we wanna go ask for money, do we include them or do we not include
As
them?
long as they're in the region, they're in.
And how is that gonna affect it? Because, once we vote on it and it's passed, they're liable for that amount of money too?
Well, how we apportion or assess capital is in the regional agreement. That doesn't change, it's in the current regional agreement. And if it gets changed so that we have 6 towns instead of 7, it's still how we allocate capital is
But
still
when
in the
we
regional
ask for the
agreement.
money, do we say, this is what it's gonna cost if they're here, or this is what it's gonna cost if they're not? That would be only fair to the people that are voting on it, if they are in fact gonna leave. And then if we're gonna have to go through this all over again, if we vote on it with a minute and say, well, now you owe us a couple $1 million for that. What are they gonna say? Well, now we gotta go start all over again. So I'm just wondering, is there any,
Well, there's a lot of wickets that.
are we looking into how we're gonna worry about that?
Personally, I would recommend we not worry about that, for the simple reason that this would need to make it through a lot of wickets. First of all, it's up to the committee, but to this point, we have not approved or agreed with 585. So until we come up with an agreement on this, A, it's not going to go to the committee for approval for a regional agreement change. B, even if that happens, it's got to go to the other 12 towns. So you've got to get through that process, and then it has to go to the Commissioner of Education. So you've got a lot of approval steps that you need to go through in order to enact this. They're looking at a timeline of wanting to be out by June of 19, which would mean, by July of 19, which means that we would have to have both committee and approval by 3/4 of 6 towns, 5 out of 6 towns, by December 31st of this year. And we're already almost too late to go to the towns with warrants on something like this. We're not even ready to update the regional agreement. Well, first we need an MOA with Cummington about how we would move forward, a transition agreement. We don't have that. So I don't see this happening in the near future, to be honest, unless something major happens with their OPEB offering.
I think that what Finance wants the full school committee to know about, or to give guidance as to what we do, what the district or what the school committee does next. And I jotted down what I think are alternatives, and I'm endorsing some but not others. We could bring the proposal that is outlined in the letter to the school committee, and we could vote on it. And my gut feel is we would vote it down, and that would be sending them the decision that perhaps their asking for. We could talk about this in the Seven-Town Advisory meeting next week, ask them for their recommendation. We could ignore it because it's very difficult dealing over this length of time. You make a decision and they're not very responsive. And the timing, as Sean alluded to, the timing is off.
And they're looking to have votes at the annual meetings this year.
Right.
That's what they'd like.
Right.
Correct.
I don't see that.
We could reinitiate, and we have, I don't want anybody to go around saying that we have not tried to talk with them. We have. We've initiated things that we've reported on, things that we have not reported on, but the finance knew about. We could try and reinitiate discussions and see if there's a compromise on OPEB that we could reach. Their proposal is wrong. We need to correct that. We could also talk to, there are a lot of things we could do. We could talk to the legislature. Maybe they would help Cummington because they helped Gateway when Gateway and Worthington were having their spat. We could simply send them a letter that asks for all these things, and I would recommend that Cummington not have their meeting until we reached agreement. It's just a waste of time, number one, and they're voting no, and it's not a good idea to keep voting no. That's a bad habit to get into. And we could outline the questions we have on the proposal. If you read the proposal, they use the word Cummington share when they're talking about E&D. Well, that's what we've been fighting about for 2 years, is Cummington share. So you have to have a little more resolution than that. They talk about things like ongoing. What does that mean in this context? These are just words that may not mean anything. In their conflicts, they say that we're starting with the transition agreement that we have, but yet and they have this amendment. But you read the amendment, and that conflicts with what they have left in the transition agreement, so that has to be resolved. The proposal they made is just totally inadequate. We could ask them for a markup of the transition agreement, see if they'll find those, add detail, but find those conflicts and resolve them, at least in their mind. So those are my thoughts. And I was hoping that people here would have some ideas on what is the school committee's next step.
I'd like to think that our next step is to go back to Cummington and get this explained. I think they proposed the 585, not saying that's the total amount they're liable for. I think they agreed 900,000 or $1 million or something like this. But the fact that they take the 585 in a lump sum and give it to you, and you invest it and grow it, is maybe in the mind. I don't know. I haven't talked to them. But I'm thinking they're thinking that this is going to grow, and I think we need to solve that mystery of how this is to work out. And I think it behooves us to put this to bed. We're bouncing back and forth. And one of the main things we've talked about before was the people of Cummington were they supportive of it? Well, according to them, they held a meeting on January 6th, and yes, they were. I have no idea how many people were in attendance, but that's what they're saying. And they're willing to go back in March and schedule a specific meeting only on that subject, to get the whole town to come, if they would, and vote on it and do it. And then they were aware of the hurdles. So I think it behooves us to follow up and to query them as to why. What is this? What makes you think 585 is equivalent to $1 million? Simple question. And then can you explain some of these other issues that you pointed out? And then come back to us. Well, we're going to have some pretty frequent meetings, but...
I think you're saying that we should reinitiate discussions with them
Yeah, I think so.
to resolve many.
Initially, one of the major stumbling points was Sean would tell us, I'm not sure that the whole town is really behind this, that they really want this. Well, they keep coming back and saying, yeah, we are behind this, we do want this. We have to take them at the word, you know, and then after that comes the money issue. And the big stumbling block is the OPEB.
The town might be behind the offer Cummington is making to the district, but in the end, if you come back with the real dollars, the town might not be behind that.
Well, that's why they're
So
gonna
they're
have a
voting.
meeting in March.
But they're voting on something that may be fiction.
Who has the real numbers?
Right.
Wilmington has their town believing that these are their real numbers. Yeah.
Well, see, I know they went out and hired their own to analyze the OPEB debt and to come up with what their, and we've heard numbers of $1.2 million. I vaguely remember last time it was like 900 and something thousand dollars. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, and I'm not gonna dispute that, but I'm just turning around saying, then they put the pencil to it, and they came up with, okay, if we come up with cash, we give the school $585,000 cash to buy us out of that thing. They haven't really said they're trying to stiff us in any manner or form, not to my knowledge.
So do you think that the sticking point is that they believe that this total that was cut, that came up with is some sort of an annuity?
Yeah,
Or something like, the lottery where this is, if you take the one lump sum now,
Yeah.
it's actually worth $20 million in the future?
I mean, I'm putting words in their mouths. We'd have to hear that from them.
That's called pre-funding.
Yeah.
And everybody now is talking pre-funding or having money on that day, July 1st, 2019. There's no disagreement on that. I mean, we have 3 CPAs, really a 4th, because our accountant, our auditor has looked at that number and said, yeah, that sounds about right. So a lot of people have said the district, if the district were to have that money now pre-funded, it's around, I don't remember the number, about $40 million. The problem is going from getting Cummington's share of that. And no outside agency has mentioned that or tried to figure that out. That's been, Cummington calculates it one way, we calculate, really Cummington is calculated it 3 ways. And we're calculating it in a certain fashion.
But as a skilled negotiator that you are, and we basically could be, we should be able to negotiate this and get it finished.
I think the problem,
And it could be rejected. But
yeah.
towns, if we all agree on it and get it that far, and then get it to the hurdle where the other towns have to agree, and don't put any kind of bias on it, just give the facts, they may reject it. If they reject it, it's out of our hands, we can't do anything about that. You know, and it's done. And then when they get the DESI,
Or we could reject it.
yes, we could reject it, but I'm just saying, just to go, they're asking out, they keep dwindling, more and more, less students. Their rep doesn't show up for the meetings, you know. Let them out. I'm not against them, you know, but I'm just saying we should end it.
We've already agreed on that. As a committee, we've agreed to do that. It's
Yeah,
just
I know.
They have to sit down with us and say, this is how we can do it, on a regular basis and figure it out what it has to be.
Well, it seems like the biggest stumbling block is the 585, right?
I would think,
An honest question, how did you arrive at that? What is that supposed to, literally you think that's all you're owed, or that's only a portion of it, but
And
get
I
that
can't believe
clarified.
Sears would be able to do that if he was in this room right now.
Well, I think if you approach them, I think you have to, at some point, say this is totally inadequate. I mean, you can't, it's way low. So, they have to be told that.
Well, Cummington came and they did show us the equation they used to get there, but it was using capital expenditures.
Yeah.
The portion of capital expenditures, which has really nothing to do with OPEB. So that's how they got to the 585. They did show us their equation. We just differ in opinion that that's a legitimate way of calculating it. It's a convenient way for them to get to 585, but it's not relevant to OPEB. And that was our disagreement there, was that how they got to that 585. They've already shared that with us, and we're in disagreement with that. So I don't see us, yeah, they came to the finance committee meeting and showed us that. That's not relevant to OPEB, so you've got to do something relevant to OPEB. And
So to Rich's point, after that meeting, there was the fact that, we did not agree with how they were coming up with their numbers, and there was a lot of also still some vagueness in their proposal. And at that point, we put the ball back in their court to respond, and we've heard nothing for some time. And then we received this letter. This letter is probably more vague than when they met with the Finance Subcommittee. So, I think the only response that we have at this point is that, if you'd like us to entertain looking at something, it needs to come with some real calculations on it and some real numbers with a, in a final draft format, something that we could actually propose, vote on, and could go out to the towns. But I think the timeline on here, I think is impossible. And I think that, the transition agreement is also sort of hanging out there in the wind. And that is part of the overall agreement that needs to happen. So I think, in my humble opinion, a letter back to the town of Cummington that, this isn't a document that we could take action on, but if they would like to come back with a proposal with calculations and numbers and a final draft, we certainly would entertain looking at it again.
And the thing that kind of jumps out at me is they have an open forum on January 6th. It's not a binding vote. It's not, 2/3 of the town. It's not a majority of the town.
That's been one of the problems all along, is that we don't have
So-
anything.
Well, that's
that the
why I
town-
think they're talking
Back up.
March. They want to try and get a sole meeting for the town in March to actually turn that open forum into a real vote.
But my point was, if they vote on March on their letter, that's very attractive to Cummington.
Well, sure.
Of course, they're gonna vote there, that's the best deal they'll ever get, but it's a fictional deal, it's not real. So, when they come back with a real number, I think Cummington will have a different thing to say, the town people, anyway. So the Cummington should not go to the vote until they have the right numbers. If they go to a vote on something that is not agreed upon by the other towns and the school committee, they're wasting everybody's time for your points. And it'll be a much sadder affair if they do vote, they all vote, hey, let's take the 585. Now Cummington, if they don't get that agreement, they gotta sell it to their people that they voted on. It's gonna be, if it's $1 million, whatever, that's 2x of what they voted on. Will the people buy to that? I don't know. I think that's not a good move on their part until they get a real number that's agreed upon between at least us and them
Sure.
before they vote on it.
The sense I get, and it's just an opinion, is that they're not going to move above the 585.
Yeah.
And I base that in part on experience in trying to negotiate with them, but also on the roof project, where they wanted somewhere around $262 million out of us. And we had already, correct me if I'm wrong on my numbers, Melissa, but we had already given them somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000. And our final offer was 100 total. And they just flat out rejected that. They said, no, we don't want it. So they took nothing. And I think it was to make a point that they thought we were too low, and they didn't want to have it never be said that it was settled based upon them accepting a lower offer. That's my opinion. So I don't know.
I think there's a dichotomy in Cummington based on discussions I've had with one faction and seeing this letter, which I think came from the other faction. One is willing to spend lots of money to leave, and it makes sense from a town's perspective and a children's perspective. The other said, yeah, it's good to leave, but I'm not going to pay, or we asked for 1.7, so it's not worth that. So, you know, this faction is saying, yeah, but you got to push this. So we're kind of caught in between. And one suggestion I had was to vote on their letter, which they suggested we do. And that would tell this faction that this is not acceptable. It's got to be more money if you really want to leave. And maybe, and the agreement I had with one official was, yeah, this is really unfortunate, we'd like to leave, but we can't afford to leave. So we'll just live with the status quo. And the status quo is acceptable to this faction and to us, but apparently not to the parents. But if we voted it down, we'd be saying, your option, I'm not being very clear, I understand. Your option is not acceptable. It has to be much, much more money than you're talking about. Otherwise, we'll just go the way we are. We'll make the best of it for a while.
So why don't we vote on that?
Well, that's
Why don't we
one
do it right
option.
now?
That's, no, well, that's not on the, it's
Oh.
not on the agenda, but we could. You know, you know, we could just say, we took up your letter
Yeah,
and we voted it down.
done.
Until it's done.
Well, would the committee be interested in having this motion on the meeting for next week?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, we'll do it then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to Melissa's bunch of jewels.
You definitely bought us some time. So we'll try to be engaging without being too repetitive, given that you have heard this information prior, the bulk of it already. But I think it's helpful to get that. There's going to be a little time to give a refresher of what you have already heard, and then obviously we'll highlight anything that is a change. I'll get started, and then Melissa will take over about midway through, and then we can certainly answer questions based on what they are. So again, this is just kind of what we're going to go through. We'll talk about, I think, which is really important, what the goals are of this budget, what they're aligned to, and what the intent is to have them do. And certainly that is very key when we're talking about anything that has to do with our staff, anything that has to do with curriculum proposals, technology, things of that nature. And we'll go through each of these different things as we have consistently before. So again, just an overview about what is this budget about. I think what we had talked about before was building an infrastructure, and I don't think that's really accurate anymore. It's really enhancing the instructional model that you have supported over the last couple of years, fine-tuning it in certain areas, aligning it to our strategic plan, aligning it to the recommendations that I shared with you from the targeted review that we received, aligning it to the data that we have received over the past few years from multiple different sources. We are looking to make sure that we have a tiered model of instruction. I will quickly give an example of that Kristen Rodriguez and Katie Novak, who are two of the consultants we work with, recently gave, that I think makes it very clear. When you're thinking of a tiered model of instruction, and this is going to be a funny way of describing it, but everyone goes to the dentist. You need to go to the dentist. That's tier 1. If you need to have a cavity filled or something fixed, that's tier 2. If you need to get a specialist involved and go to an orthodontist, that's tier 3. You never stop going to the dentist. So that's kind of what we want to make sure we have. Solid tier 1 instruction for everybody. Remediation where it's needed to get back to tier 1. And very specific specialization if it's needed in tier 3. So I saw that the other night. I had explained that to a couple of people who don't work in education. They're like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, now I get it. So I thought it was interesting because sometimes you gotta like get out of the educational jargon, and that's about as far out of the educational jargon as I've seen it. So
Yeah,
there's
but this is a painful metaphor.
Another one was sports, but I've
Yeah,
exhausted
that'd be better.
sports metaphors in the past couple of weeks with the Super Bowl. So, but again, and when you're thinking about the person in the chair, think a little bit more about the provider. Dentists really should be able to serve the vast majority of people. You might then have a dentist who does some remediation, and you're going to get a specialist involved, hopefully with something not too unpleasant, but to help you feel better about tier 1.
So really, that's mine for this week. Next week, I'll use one that's a little bit more fun. Educational equity, we heard that in our targeted program review. Part of educational equity is making sure the tiers are balanced. We're not top-heavy, which is traditional in Tier 3, and forgetting about the importance of Tier 1. Rigorous instructional model, again, we're right back into educational jargon, but really making sure that we have the right tools in the hands of our teachers so that they can get the best results possible. And all of what we have in this budget is consistent with the targeted review as well as our strategic plan. I think the thing that we're the most excited about is we really looked at the addition of a K-8 instructional coach. That's all about Tier 1. We spend a lot of time and a lot of people specializing in Tier 3. And I say that with being one of those people and being a special education person by training. It's very important, but you can't forget Tier 1. It doesn't work well if Tier 1 is not solid. Tier 1 is our teachers in the classroom doing the work with all kids. And we're proposing a K-8 instructional coach. We've done a lot of training. We need to move away from that. Everyone needs coaching. The best athletes in the world are the ones who get the most coaching. There's an athlete reference instead of the dentist. But we really feel we need to increase that, and that's where we're ready to go. Addition of 2 Title I tutors, that's your Tier 2. Right now we don't have them equitably K-8. This will give us equity in our Tier 2. The one-to-one Chromebook model, this is a change from last time. Thank you, Mr. Gazzillo. That's Mr. Rob, thanks you. So we had said we were going to go there 3 through 10. With a small increase that you'll see to the technology budget, which is a ultimate decrease to the decrease. It's still a decrease in the technology budget, it's slightly smaller. What we were able to do though is by really looking at all of the technology we have throughout the district, looking at breaking up Chromebook carts that currently travel in departments, giving them out first, and then buying Chromebooks on top of it to supplement where needed. We only needed 2 or 3 Chromebook carts. So it worked out really well. For less than $20,000, we will have a 3 through 12 one-to-one model. K-2 essentially has technology in their hands anytime that they need it. It just is more teacher-driven. And I think that's developmentally highly appropriate. So we really feel, and I can say this with confidence, I think on behalf of the technology department, the instructional leaders, people in classrooms, that right now technology needs are met. If there's something that isn't in the hands of someone that they know, I likely either don't know about it, it's cutting edge, or it's not necessarily something that's fully supported, but the basics are there for everybody, and that's been a huge gain in the past few years. The aligned math curriculum K-8, that you're going to hear more about. That's the one that we are really still looking at. We know right now, you saw in the targeted review, we have an aligned curriculum in math K-5 that we feel okay about. We have some questions around that curriculum, but it's aligned, it's getting the job done. We may want to look at that over time. But 6 through 8, we've been piloting a few different models this year. We'll ultimately bring one forward for a recommendation to adopt fully. But it's still something we're looking at in real time to see what that data looks like. Science, we don't feel that way. Science, we feel actually really good and really sure about our decision. We have actually throughout the year moved to just 1 pilot. In the pilot they're doing, they're confident they want to continue with. It's working well for us, and we will be recommending that through the curriculum subcommittee. And that will align us K-8 in science to the next generation science standards, which are the ones that Sean Therian has talked extensively about with this group. You're doing science as opposed to memorizing how to do science at the K-8 level. So we're actually feeling good about this. They're still working hard here to make the right choice. And it's also a little bit different of a choice because these standards changed and the decision is needed. If you continue with what you were doing, you would not be aligned. This is more we know we need to align. We have some different things, though, that are options. There's less options in science. And you'll hear about that after March 8th when we have the curriculum meeting. So again, a lot of these are just revisions, but I mentioned the Title I tutor. One's being added at the elementary. That will result in us having 1 at Kittredge Beckett and 2 at Craneville. It will result in us having 1 per grade level at the middle school, so they can really get familiar with the content there. The middle school, we talked a couple times about the capacity last year, a little bit the previous year, but the bulk of it was done last year. I don't like this jargon or this term, but we right-sized the staffing through the team model. Who teaches the kids English, math, science, social studies? We went down by a team last year. We knew it left overtures in our Explorer classes. We just don't have enough kids to go through the amount of Explorers that we have for teachers. So this year we had 2 retirements that allowed us to really right-size the Explorer model without reductions to people's employment, but they are reductions to FTE. So there's a teacher retirement at the middle school not being replaced in an Explorer, a library retirement at the middle school not being replaced. They're both being filled with capacity we have right now in our teaching staff. It will only grow next year, but then we'll level off. The Title I tutor, again, when we talked about this, there is one actual reduction to a person on staff right now who is in a .4 position at the high school level. We have capacity in another person on staff at the middle school. So we're able to cover that need. There's no impact to students. There's also a reduction of a .5. That's a retirement though. Everything else is retirement driven. We have that capacity in current staff. The middle and the high school will share some staff next year, and they'll be able to cover these needs, as well as when you heard Mr. Rob talk about how he can grow the AP program without growing his staff. That's exactly how. You see our K-8 instructional coach, and then paraprofessional. Often what happens is the budget's adopted in March. Special education needs don't change on a calendar. They change at any given time. That's a position that has not been filled for quite some time. So we're removing it from the budget to be accurate in that. This I just want to talk just quickly too, because I don't want to be back in front of you and have people say, wait a minute, I thought you thought this should be contracted. I don't necessarily. Behavioral services position. We would very much like to be able to find someone to have on staff long-term as a board-certified behavioral analyst. The issue with that is it's a legal requirement to provide those services. If you can't find someone to do so, you can't do what you could do with a first-grade teacher or an English teacher. You can't call in a long-term sub. It's a very rare certification. And the minute you don't have those services, you're out of compliance and you must purchase them to provide them to the families. So right now we've got to do this because this is how we can find the certified person. It's very difficult to find somebody anywhere in the state right now with this certification who's looking to work in public ed. It's very, very difficult to find someone in Berkshire County. So it's working. What we're doing is going well. The providers are getting good services. But if we were to find out there was someone out there looking for a BCBA, we may want to consider reposting for that at some point. I just want to be transparent of why are you going back and forth. It's to meet the need. It's not a philosophical kind of thing. Again, that was unfilled in 2018, so it's been removed, as was this due to changes in our population. You will see that our out-of-district tuition is slightly up, slightly up in the terms of how much special ed tuition costs. The amount of kids is slightly up, the cost is up. And you do know we are using a transition program in Pittsfield to meet the needs of our students in the 18 to 22 range. So the FTEs in special ed are down. Some of the costs in other areas in student services are up. Just how we're providing those services. And that's right here where you see that decline in the FTE in student services. And the vast majority of the rest of these are pretty stable. But when we say we're down by 5.1 FTEs, that's not necessarily people. Not necessarily people, and the bulk of it is a change in student services. But it's not necessarily that the service is gone. It's being provided in a different way, such as with the BCBA, students in the transition program in Pittsfield, reducing the need at Wacona. In addition to that, students who have been placed out of district due to the level of need they have. Let me keep going, or you want to jump in now?
So the increases to the budget really haven't changed since the initial budget. There is increases to salaries, increases to benefits. The salary increases are contractual and column movement. We have that every year. The OPEB trust appropriation is increased in this budget by $150,000. So year over year, the increase is now $250,000. That was discussed at length in finance and agreed upon at the finance subcommittee level. Transportation, these are the same increases, contractual. Student services, this is what Lori was just talking about with the out-of-district tuition, getting higher, charter school, and the behavioral services moving over to contracted services. Charter school, the assessment increase is, per the state, they give us a cherry sheet, and on the cherry sheet it says, we anticipate these revenues and these assessments. So the charter school assessment year over year is increasing $17,000, almost $18,000. Those are really the same except for the OPEB. Decreases to the budget, these are also the same. Utilities decreasing by about $35,000 due to a solar contract. And natural gas heating contracts. Unemployment, we don't anticipate to have the claims that we've had over the last few years. That will decrease. We've seen it decrease this year. So we've knocked that account down by $10,000. Technology, last budget, the initial budget, we were down by close to $30,000. Now we're only down by $17,000 year over year. And that's with adding in the Chromebooks, the Chromebook cards, 3 of them, to make the grade 3 through 12 one-to-one. And Berkshire County Retirement, this is the same. The appropriation request decrease year over year came in just under $30,000, so that decreases that line item. So this screen is bad. This, the tentative last year's budget, final budget was $27,096,443. This year's budget, and I'm sorry for the white box, this year's budget was $27,408,000. Right now, the tentative, $871,000. Right now, that's an increase of $312,000, 1.15% increase year over year.
It wasn't way loud though.
It-
You could have
it
totally
wasn't
blamed
loud.
the computer. I think you could have called that a technical error. We looked at this an hour ago, by the way.
So the revenue estimates, and again, this comes from the cherry sheet, and we wait for the governor's budget, which comes out the fourth Wednesday in January, and the numbers we get from that are all of our state aid and all of our state assessments. The other numbers are local, and they're estimated at the local level. So state aid, you can see, according to the cherry sheet or the governor's budget, has increased $47,000. Chapter 71, which is the transportation reimbursement, increased $24,000. And this is over FY18. We're utilizing $450,000 in transportation revolving funds. That has not changed. We're not adding any additional regional transportation revenue expectations because we have the revolving fund at this point. Charter school reimbursement is $28,403. So we have an assessment of over $350,000. We get back $28,000 in reimbursements for that. Interest income, Medicaid reimbursement, miscellaneous income, all health level. Those fluctuate a bit. The interest income is up this year, but I hesitate to increase the anticipated revenue because you don't know how long that'll stay higher than it has been in past years. E&D appropriation, this is following the budget guidelines, which states if E&D is over $1 million, use 75% of the E&D amount, I believe. So that came out to $1,111,116. And that's the same from the initial budget. Town assessments in this tentative budget are now at $15,902,443. So all these revenue sources give us our total budget of $27,408,871. Where are we spending that money? So this is the breakdown. This is the summary page in the actual budget. It's probably page 4 or 5. And we break it down by function or program area. So all of these are fairly similar to the initial budget. You'll see some of the changes here in the elementary, middle, and high. That's due to staff movement, and that'll continue to change. That changes throughout the year because we move as we see where the needs are. And special ed increases about the same from the initial. This is 10,000 increase due to 10,000 added for MSBA administration fees, possible fees. And the superintendent's line is because there's a school student activity audit that's due. These lines are really all the same, not much has changed here, except again for the OPEB trust fund. The FY19 budget is calling for $400,000 to be deposited into the fund this year. That's an increase of $250 year over year. You'll notice the benefits have changed. Berkshire Health Group voted on January 25th not to increase the premiums this year. So we're seeing a 0% increase. And what that means for the group is that the claims for the past year are less than the premiums received. They're in good shape. So the board voted not to increase any premiums this year. So you'll see there's a big decrease in that line item from the initial.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Well, actually, there were 2 years, about 7 years ago, where they did 2 back-to-back 0% increase years.
Premium holidays is what we call them.
And they've done that as well, and that's always on the table. And what'll happen is we'll look at the revenue, we'll look at the fund balance and decide whether or not a premium holiday could be enacted during the course of 19. But right now, that's not on the table. What was discussed was the 0% at this point. And in the past, when the 0% was used, they used their fund balance to offset what the increase should have been. So if all the numbers called for a 5% increase, to make it 0, fund balance was used to make up the difference. This is not the case this year. We have enough collected premiums versus claims to have an accurate 0% increase. We're not offsetting it with any revenue.
Do you know what their fund balance is right now?
13 million
So that's just about the same as it was
and some change, yeah.
when we had the holiday a few years ago.
Yep. And that, that changes every month depending on investments, claims, things like that. It can change quickly, but it's held steady this year. And that was part of the reason why go with an increase when you have that money sitting there. It's almost as if you're overcharging and putting more money in there. So stick with the 0% and hopefully have another very good year, claims-wise. This is the category chart, and there was a suggestion at the last budget meeting, the initial budget, to add all of the instructional levels together so that you can see what is spent on instruction totally. This does not include special education, but it does include elementary, middle, and high school. So all of the instructional charges are here, and that is our highest category for expenditures. It's at 8.4 million. The benefits and health insurances are the next highest at 7 million. So that makes up about 15 million of a $27 million budget. And the rest are really, year after year, kind of fall in the same order. So to simplify it even more, breaking it up into 3 categories: salaries, benefits, and operational. Salaries are about 49%, and that's this big blue block here. Benefits are the lighter blue at 7 million, 26%. So these two, being a service industry and having employees, that's the bulk of our budget. The balance is operational, and that includes transportation, the building maintenance, other not salaries, but other expenditures related to instructional. So we also have grant revenue that we use to help operate the budget, the district. So we have a $27 million operating budget, But we also have close to 2 million, at least this is what we're anticipating next year, of grant money, and that's from federal grants, state grants, private grants, and reimbursement accounts. And it's broken out here. This has not changed since the initial budget. And these will change as the year goes on and we start getting notices as to what our grants will be next year. So here's the town assessments, and the columns denote the net town assessment for 19. This column has the 18 town assessment, and you can see the differences here. So in the aggregate, the change in assessments year over year is 69,918. That's 0.44% increase. Total assessments would be at 15,902,443. We have some towns that have dropped and some towns that have gone up. I can tell you that the net minimum contribution, which is this column here, and that's the number that the state says each town has to pay, minimally pay, to educate the children of their town, has increased in the ones that are showing the increase and decreased in the ones that are showing the decrease. So that's a big driving factor, along with the total amount of the district budget, as to what the net town assessment comes out to be. Capital budgets is the same as the initial, most likely will stay the same through the final. Nothing has changed here, still a decrease of 56,000 for FY19. And it will be available online. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but the .44 is the lowest that I've seen in maybe ever. It's very low. I mean, the town should be extremely happy, I think.
Well, the spread was a little more dramatic.
But there's not, the message is we can't affect
that.
the spread
No.
at all.
Thank you, Melissa.
So before we get into the motions, I just want to give the school committee some instructions. As noted tonight is the tentative operating budget, or the tentative budget approval. We only require a simple majority. So it's broken down into the four parts: the gross salaries, retirees, operating budget, which is the bottom line, and the capital adoption. So we're going to step through these one by one. When it comes to March 8th, which is our final budget adoption, just a note here that we require 2/3 of the committee to approve the budget for only the operating budget. We can have the simple majority for the other three items. So that means that we need 10 people here that are able to approve the budget that evening. So I just wanted to make that point.
Very good. Move on to the motions.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a tentative gross salaries, contractual salary increases for all employees, and active employees' insurance benefits budget for the school year 2018-2019 in the amount of $18,383,057 as proposed in the tentative fiscal year 2019 maintenance and operating budget document and as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the tentative FY19 gross salaries and benefits part of the budget. Is there any discussion? I'm not sure I can explain.
For those who haven't been through this recently, it's broken down this way, separating out the gross salary and the retirement's benefit is broken out of the operating budget because some people, because of conflicts, can't vote on certain parts of the budget. So those people will abstain when it comes to those particular parts. However, once those have been adopted and consolidated into the total operating, then everybody can vote on it. And that, this is a bit awkward, but this is the legal way of doing it, and it works.
Okay, is there any discussion on the first motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
2 abstentions, the motion carries.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a tentative retirees' health insurance benefits budget for the school year 2018-2019 in the amount of $2,048,984, as proposed in the tentative fiscal year 2019 maintenance and operating budget document as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the tentative FY19 retirees benefits budget. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
1 abstention, the motion carries.
Whereas by its regional agreement, the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee must prepare a tentative budget 75 days prior to the first annual town meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School District adopts a tentative gross operating budget for the school year 2018-2019 in the amount of $27,408,871, as proposed in the tentative fiscal year 2019 maintenance and operating budget document as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
We have a motion and a second for adoption of the tentative FY19 operating budget. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a tentative capital budget for the school year 2018-2019 in the amount of $373,323 as proposed in the tentative fiscal year 2019 maintenance and operating budget document as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the tentative FY19 capital budget. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We have a tentative budget.
And we have one other motion. This is approval of a new position. Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee approve the new position of K through 8 instructional coach, which was included in the fiscal year 2019 tentative budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of a new position. Is there any discussion? Mr. Lockton.
I'm in favor of this position, but I want to tell you why it's on the agenda. If we add a position, once we have the final operating budget, by our policy, we have to approve, the school committee has to approve that because it obviously has an effect on the overall budget, and we have to accommodate that in a number of different ways. In this case, we know the money is there because it's included in the tentative budget, so we're okay. But this is an unusual position because it's a instructional coach, and we really don't have too many positions where we coach or we teach the teachers. We have one for technology, I believe, and this is an additional one. So it's unusual in that respect, but it's a high leverage position, and we feel that's appropriate. The other is this is a non-union position. It's one we haven't had before, so we're generating the job description right now, where most of the positions that are in the contract, we know what a teacher does, for example. So that's why it's a bit unusual motion, and I don't think Lori felt that it needed to be in it, but I insisted that we put it in
Yeah, I agree with
for those reasons.
Yeah, it's also a grant funded
agree with you.
position in the coming year as well, so.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approval of new position indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries.
We've already addressed item B, the Cummington letter. The next the next finance subcommittee meeting will be on February 27th at 6 p.m. at Central Office. That concludes our report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gazzola and Mrs. DeSimone.
Thank you.
Policy, I know they're trying to set up another meeting. I don't know that there's anything to report, given there hasn't been a meeting since our last school committee meeting. And personnel, Mr. Lockerbell?
We have two items that would be considered in the executive session, so we can do that now, or we can do that later as we think it's appropriate.
We can do it at the end of the meeting if the committee does not object, but we do need to come out of executive session to do the votes.
To the end.
Okay. Final one is technology.
We have not done.
I thought Mr. Les was going to, or did, schedule a meeting.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right, then we'll call the building project.
Great, so you've got the most recent newsletter that's coming out monthly now, largely due to Sean Berrien, who's taken a huge leadership role with the building project, which is great. We do have the first video. Thank you, Bonnie. That was an excellent suggestion, and they were willing to accommodate it on the website of the visioning session that has taken place. The feedback from that visioning session was excellent. It was incredibly thought-provoking and got some really great conversations. We had very active participation from the students, which was really wonderful to see. We had some very active student participants. The next session is on Friday, the 16th. Again, a long day, but it did go by very quickly. He keeps it moving. Dr. Lucker really keeps it moving from 9 to 4. There will be a videotape of that session as well. And when we send out the next newsletter, we'll include the links to those sessions. We've also had the first working group session. Those are facilitated by the design team from DRA. Primarily Carl, who's the principal, does facilitate those meetings. There was a fairly large group in attendance at the first meeting. He really walked us through everything that's going to take place over the next year. The big piece of work right now in front of us that myself and primarily Aaron Robb with a group of others who have the information needed is drafting the educational plan. We're putting the nuts and bolts in front of it. It has to be what do you do, and then you get to what do you want to do. We obviously have the information about what we do, so we need to get that in there. Interestingly, the MSBA includes a model on their website. Their model is Mount Greylock's educational plan, which is great because obviously we have a relationship with Mount Greylock, and Mr. Robb has been in regular communication with their principal. So we're hoping to get a draft of that to DRA to look at what we have and then to start moving forward with what's in the visioning sessions. Ultimately, that full draft will come to this committee to see, but that's what we're working on right now. There are going to be several workshops over the course of the next year to year and a half to get community involvement, get community input, basically mini visioning sessions where more people can provide input as to what's been done and what they may see or what they want to see. And those are, right now we've just scheduled them. They're going to be sent out to everybody very shortly. March 27th at the Windsor Town Hall at 5 p.m. Followed by, it's a double header because it's being led by DRA. So they're coming out here with their full team. So they want to go right from there to Wacona at 7 p.m. The workshops are pretty structured and they facilitate them. They're 90 minutes. What they have asked is that we, obviously myself, Mr. Robb will be there, as well as others who can accompany us. But what we're trying to get is people who live in those towns, who are on the building committee, to be at the one for their town. So the first one that comes to mind, if I am Gary Campbell and I live in Peru, go to the one for Hinsdale in Peru. That makes sense, just to have neighbors there. So on that note, March 29th, we'll be in Beckett, Washington at 5 p.m. and at Kittredge at 7 p.m. That's the first of a series of workshops that will take place. So DRA, we were kind of feeling really supported by Skanska, and we still are absolutely. They are facilitating a lot of the logistics in our relationship, but DRA has definitely jumped into the driver's seat as far as the substance of the work. So, but we've been extremely happy with both. So that's where we're at. The 15th, just because I won't have time to tell you, if you haven't already seen, there's another working session on the 15th. Those are in the afternoon. Those are Mr. Rob's there, Mr. Messina, some of the staff from the high school. Mr. Peters was able to join us, Jason Dion. Those are kind of really roll up your sleeves and get into the work. Is next Thursday from 3 to 4:30. Immediately followed by the school building committee. The full meeting is 4:30 to 6. Immediately followed by this meeting. So if you want to have a awesome February 15th, I can fill your calendar. So that's pretty much where we're at.
I just wanted to comment, I shared this with Lori a little bit earlier. It just happened to be that we had a snow day yesterday, and we had an impromptu visioning session at 33 South Road. Several of my neighbors were very interested. They started out by being a little disappointed that they couldn't participate in the visioning session, but we were able to show the YouTube video, and there was some of the people who had expressed some negativity about the timing of visioning sessions were very pleased with the overall discussion. We had popcorn and we sat and watched the visioning session. It was very enlightening. I found it very interesting, the mix of people that were involved in the discussions that went on. Quite honestly, we did fast forward through some of the nitty-gritty, but some of the things that were a takeaway were the flip charts that were put up of the different groups and how they rated the different educational concepts. And we did our own little scoring, and we were pretty much in line with what was presented. There were a couple of people that were a little different. Also, the March 29th, when I saw the email about the March 29th community session, I forwarded that on to the town administrator, the town clerk, and the chairman of the select board. And on the 7th of February, it was posted on the town website, so it is available. I've already talked to some people who are planning to go, and I've offered to drive anyone who'd like to go. So we're hoping to get a good representation from the community of Peru. In addition, Gary Campbell emailed me, because I CC'd him on the communication to the town, asking when the annual town meeting is, so I'm anticipating that Gary will be present at that meeting as well, on May 12th. So we're trying to make some progress in terms of communication, and I prefaced it by saying that the goal of communicating that information was to be transparent, clear, and fully above board about what was going on. So hopefully it makes a difference.
Thank you. And we're very up close to this and in it all the time, especially myself and Mr. Rob. So if you think of things, like Bonnie was kind enough to say, why aren't we videotaping this? Like, let's just ask the question. So please do, let us know. If you hear things in the community that we could clarify online, if we're not getting things out enough. All the principals have been very actively on board with this, and they are sending out the same communication that Aaron sends out at Wacona to their buildings as well, which is helpful. So there's like a cut and paste. Sometimes there's a delay, but you will get this. If you're a Craneville parent, you should get this in Debbie's communication in the next week or two. Beckett Washington, Kittredge, and they've had the community nights in their buildings. So we're trying to make sure, but if you don't feel like you're getting enough and we could do more, let us know. Because sometimes we're trying to judge, are we giving too much? And people are like, I've gotten this 5 different ways. Let us know that as well. But are we giving enough? So especially for those of you who receive things as parents. Is it feeling like saturation point or you need more? Yeah.
And some of my coworkers who are parents of children in the district, I shared the newsletter before it was posted to the website, and they were very appreciative of the fact that there would be a video and that there were newsletters coming out. So they were very happy about that.
Good.
It's great.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Next order of business is superintendent's report.
So the bulk of our report was our show, but I will, hopefully you are able to access these reports online, because there are some things that you need to be able to access it online to fully appreciate it. This week there was a picture walk with Kathy Buckley through Kittredge School, so I've been trying to give you kind of an up close and personal, getting into classrooms the best you can remotely. So hopefully you were able to look at that. The principals have been doing a lot more of that in their communications. The one thing that's the most exciting is just on a week ago, last Saturday, I walked into this library well before 8 a.m. and it was packed with teachers. The room was packed. It was all the way around. Well over 40 people were in this room to learn from Katie Novak together. It was the first of several sessions in a graduate course that our staff is taking. I'd say 90% of our elementary teaching staff was in the room. A big group from the middle school who came as a team, a group of teachers from the high school who came as a math department, with a large percentage of the department represented, with a special education teacher as well. We've already gotten a lot of feedback from people. If I can't for whatever reason, is there another one? And we've got a sign-up list for this summer of a replicable course that will be offered on site. This is really getting past why and what UDL is and into how do you UDL lessons in the classroom. And it was awesome. So this is all part of our plan that we have kind of set out to achieve, as far as how we are going to implement universally designed instruction in all classrooms, how we're going to get teachers the support they need to feel empowered to do so. The data and the research around it is really second to none at this point, and there's not a teacher in that room, I don't think, who left feeling that way. So that was awesome. I think that Dr. Novak, who some of you are familiar with if you've read her work or you follow her on Twitter, was so excited about our district when she saw how many people were here in the room and the dialogue that they were having with each other and with her. We were here from 8 to 2 with like a very quick working lunch. So we'll be back again in a couple more Saturdays, and there's a couple other sessions, and they're working away online in between. So that was just, I was really excited about that. UDL is all about giving student choice and making students responsible for choices, which is really what 21st century learning is about and what the world will be that they enter. It's really about keeping firm goals, but giving kids flexible ways of getting there. All kids have the same instructional goal, and that's the key point, to avoid creating gaps. But there's flexible different ways that they meet those goals, and they demonstrate that knowledge. And I think we'll get to a point that we'll have some teachers who'd be willing to show you what that looks like in practice after taking this course, and that's the best way for you to see it. So I'd like to bring in a couple people who I think would really be able to give a much better example than I did with the dentist. So I'm just trying to think of another one. It's kind of like how everyone has Coach Bledsoe, Coach Belichick. Then some people have Josh McDaniels. Then there's got to be some other guy who only works with the tight ends, but it didn't have the same effect. So we're sticking with the dentist, even if it hurts. Yeah, sorry, we're sticking with the dentist. I'll get a better one. So just check out, I have a webinar, check out what they're doing. On the same note, we've kind of said that that there's an umbrella of inclusive practices that are social emotional learning, UDL, and then positive behavioral intervention supports. We're very lucky that we have somebody on staff in Peter Falkowski, who's our middle school principal, who has extensive training in that third round, which he gave to the committee last summer when he came and he talked about it. Same deal, after school course, over 40 teachers in the room with Peter learning restorative practices. Of the people in the room, Annie Pecor, who's the vice principal at Craneville, and Steve Messina, who's the vice principal at the high school, with teams. So people are really signed up for training and invested. Just wanted to make sure everyone's aware. We do know that Commissioner Mitchell Chester had passed away last June. They've had an interim for a while. They did hire the next commissioner, Jeff Riley, who of the 3 candidates was the local administrator from Massachusetts, the receiver in Lawrence, previous assistant superintendent in Boston. He's supposed to be taking over pretty quickly. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes, because Mitchell Chester certainly had a strong presence and strong identification of priorities. The last thing that hopefully I'm sure you could read about, but we did have the orientation at Wacona. Did a lot of PR around that.
I was there with Joanne Dowling, which I think is a positive to see the connection. Mr. Falkowski was home with his newborn, but I think a lot of families appreciated seeing Mrs. Dowling there, representing the middle school in the partnership that Wacona and Nesicus have prioritized. They did something a little different, that the kids, they've been moving away from the more traditional, giving kids opportunities to talk to kids, and parents opportunities to talk more directly with people who will be teaching their kids or overseeing the departments, as opposed to, Aaron and Steve lecturing at them for several hours. So it seemed to have gone well. And that's all I have. Just so you know what's coming up though, because sometimes what are we going to be talking about? I am planning next Thursday, we're going to have a full presentation on social emotional learning. We're going to try something new, and our 3 vice principals are going to do it. I think it'll be nice for you to see them. You don't hear their voices as much, and they're all very active in this. So you'll hear from Steve Messina, Joanne Dowling, and Annie Pecor, who have a great working relationship and do have a lot of leadership in this. That will be next time. I'm going to give you an update on Wacona enrollment and some further update from myself, Terry Mason, and Aaron Robb about some of the concerns with wellness, how they're being addressed, and how we think it's really going to be a positive outcome overall to get rid of every other day classes. There's actually several kids who are taking an interest in taking a full year now of PE every day. The real goal is these DLT numbers are huge. Those are the directed learning time, and both Mr. Robb and Mr. Messina have had concerns that it's a function of the schedule, because our DLT numbers are as high as they've ever been and slightly higher, and our enrollment's down. And a lot of it is kids just don't have somewhere else to choose to be those other periods, and now kids should have some pretty full schedules. We had an electives fair last week. Yes, something at Laura. No, this week. This week. The snow day messed it up, right? Or he was afraid it
No,
would.
it was Monday or Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday.
Advising day was messed up.
I messed up something for him. I messed up advising day. Monday or Tuesday, yes, the electives fair. If you follow Aaron Robb on Twitter, you will know everything that happens in that high school. But yes, so we'll give you a full update at the March meeting on March 8th on that, on where it is and where the enrollments look like and what Kerry's plan is. And that is it. So you know what's coming, that if you're like, why didn't you talk about this? Some of the things I'm going to be talking about that. The targeted review I'll talk about with you in depth on March 8th as well.
Okay, the superintendent's also provided the official October 1 enrollment figures on pages 9 and 10 of the report, so if there's any questions on that. Otherwise, we'll move forward. Okay, next item, order of business is personnel, and the superintendent has noted several personnel changes, mostly retirements, a couple of appointments. And are there any remarks or questions about that? Mr. Lockettell.
I'd just like to say that in the time of dinosaurs, when the school committee actually hired individuals, when a long service employee retired, we actually gave them a proclamation that lauded their accomplishments over their career at Central Berkshire. And in a way, I miss that, because we should be recognizing some of these long service employees, and I see some of them here. They've been loyal to our district, and whenever we go through times of low finances or attacks from the public, they have a tough job, and it's not the most rewarding job. So I really want to laud and thank those teachers and other positions that have gone through a lot and stayed with Central Berkshire and done, as far as I know, a good job for Central Berkshire.
Yeah, to Mr. Lockettell's point, 1990, 1988, 2004 are just some of the dates that we're seeing here of when people joined the district. So it's been a couple decades. Okay, moving on to the next order of business is old business, and I don't believe we have any. There's no new business, but I would like to make a note here that if you note here, if you read this, the member requests to place items on a future agenda. So we've already done that this evening with the vote on the Huntington letter. But this is an opportunity, to ask for items to be placed on the next agenda, which is going to be next week. And as usual, you can always call me or send me an email. I've responded that way as well, and I always honor that. Okay? So we'll close this part of the meeting with remarks from the good of the committee, and then we'll go into executive session. So does anyone have any remarks for the good of the committee? Not this evening?
I just want to say, it just brings your attention, at the bottom of that list, we did have Mike Cayley appointed as the head custodian at Wacona, and we're extremely happy about that. He has a lot of history with Wacona, and it's certainly a reassuring transition knowing how long Mike Daniels was there going into a building project. So that was in flux for a short time. Mike Cayley stepped in as the interim, and it fit very well for all involved, so he is on board formally. So that's, I think, a really good thing. So we're happy to have him.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Locatell.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee goes into executive session at 8:50 p.m. in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy and preparation for negotiations with the CPEA unit, and to accept minutes of previous executive sessions for which the chair has declared an executive session is necessary to protect the bargaining position of the committee, and to reconvene in open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go into executive session. When the superintendent calls your name, please vote your intentions.
Ms. DiTomaso?
Yes.
Mr. Farley? Mr. Gazillo?
Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Locatell?
Yes.
Mrs. Latazori?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Armacost?
Yes.
Mr. Bartels?
Yes.
We're in executive session.
Okay, the meeting will transition to executive session. We'll take a 2-minute recess. Okay, this meeting is adjourned in open session. Mr. Locatell.
Whereas the Administrative Assistance Unit of the Central Berkshire Education Association on January 30th, 2018 ratified a settlement agreement between that unit and the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee to be incorporated into a successor contract for the period July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee ratify the settlement agreement between the Administrative Assistance Unit of the Central Berkshire Education Association and the School Committee to be incorporated into a successor contract for the period July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, as recommended by the committee's bargaining team.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for ratification of the 1-year administrative assistance contract. Is there any discussion? Okay, just a note for the voting this evening, Municipal Rep Bartels does join in this vote. So then, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Whereas the Administrative Assistance Unit of the Central Berkshire Education Association on January 30th, 2018 ratified a settlement agreement between that unit and the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee to be incorporated into a successor contract for the period July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2020, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee ratify the settlement agreement between the Administrative Assistance Unit of the Central Berkshire Education Association and the School Committee to be incorporated into a successor contract for the period July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2020, as recommended by the committee's bargaining team.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for ratification of the 3-year administrative assistance contract. Is there any discussion? And again, Municipal Rep Bartels. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before we do, could I just say one thing? Dick, thank you so much for all the effort you put in your team.
Thank you very much. I thought about mentioning that I was helped and assisted by John Bartels and Barbara Kraft Reese.
Yep.
I think that was it for the AAs, if I'm not mistaken. And Bonnie was there at the last mediation. I guess it was to her. We got the settlement.
Good job, Mike.
She saved us.
I doubt that. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 9:06.
Can I just sign you by?